For decades, medical practice treated menopause as a simple switch that could be managed with a single daily pill. But updated clinical guidelines spanning 2024 to 2026 reflect a much more precise protocol. The focus has shifted to transdermal patches, body-identical hormones, and the reintroduction of testosterone. To understand why the treatment changed, we have to look at how the body actually transitions. Perimenopause is a state of biological chaos. Hormone production spikes and crashes wildly over several years. Postmenopause, by contrast, is a complete hormonal flatline. Because a 45-year-old in perimenopause still has an erratic cycle, her doctor might prescribe standard hormonal birth control. The high doses of synthetic hormones in these pills override her body's natural cycle to stop the severe fluctuations and prevent pregnancy. Once 12 consecutive months pass without a period, she enters full postmenopause. Her biological needs shift completely. She no longer needs cycle suppression. She needs targeted hormone replacement therapy to replenish what her ovaries have stopped producing. At this stage, how those hormones enter her bloodstream becomes a critical safety factor. Attempting to treat both of these distinct biological states with a single oral pill introduces significant, unnecessary physical risk. Optimizing health in postmenopause requires replacing multiple specific hormones with precise, personalized delivery methods. When it comes to replacing estrogen systemically, patients generally choose between two routes: swallowing a pill or applying a transdermal patch, gel, or spray to the skin. This animated diagram illustrates a biological process called first-pass liver metabolism. Swallowing an estrogen pill means it passes through the digestive tract, routing it straight to the liver for processing. This specific liver interaction activates the body's clotting factors, which significantly spikes the risk of deep vein thrombosis and stroke. Now, look at what happens with the transdermal patch. The estrogen absorbs through the skin directly into the bloodstream. It bypasses the liver entirely, preventing the activation of those clotting factors. Because of this mechanical difference in how the body processes the hormone, current clinical consensus states that transdermal estrogen is the safest first-line treatment for managing systemic menopausal symptoms, particularly for women with cardiovascular risk factors. But replacing estrogen is only half the equation for a woman who still has her uterus. Unopposed estrogen causes the uterine lining to thicken, which can lead to endometrial cancer. To protect that lining, she absolutely must take progesterone. Historically, patients were prescribed synthetic progestins, which have non-progesterone-like effects on the body. Today, the clinical preference is micronized progesterone, a compound derived from plant extracts that is biologically identical to the progesterone human bodies naturally produce. This side-by-side chart reveals the stark difference between the two. Over a 5-year timeline, combining estrogen with older synthetic progestins actively increases the relative risk of breast cancer to 1.4. Meanwhile, using body-identical micronized progesterone maintains a flat, stable baseline risk. It does not enhance breast cell proliferation. By utilizing transdermal absorption for estrogen and body-identical compounding for progesterone, modern clinical protocols bypass the severe blood clot risks and the immediate breast cancer spikes that caused so much fear in early HRT trials. Even with estrogen and progesterone perfectly balanced, many women report persistent brain fog, lethargy, and a loss of physical vitality. To solve that, we have to look at testosterone, a hormone society incorrectly labels as strictly male. Healthy young women naturally produce significant amounts of testosterone in their ovaries and adrenal glands. In fact, testosterone circulates in higher concentrations than estrogen. But as women age, those levels plummet, often far more steeply than their estrogen levels do. This bar chart highlights the findings from a 2024 UK clinical trial tracking perimenopausal and postmenopausal women who were given low-dose transdermal testosterone. 47% of the women reported a measurable improvement in their mood, 39% noted increased cognitive clarity, and 52% saw an increase in libido. While the clinical data is clear, access remains highly fragmented. Physicians in the UK and Australia widely prescribe low-dose testosterone to women, and in the United States, obtaining it is still a difficult, off-label process for most patients. When testosterone is excluded from a menopause protocol, the endocrine system remains partially depleted. Women are actively denied the hormone responsible for maintaining their cognitive sharpness, emotional resilience, and physical drive. Systemic patches and pills treat the entire body, but they often lack the strength to fully restore the pelvic region. This localized deficiency leads to Genitourinary Syndrome of Menopause, or GSM, a condition affecting up to 50% of postmenopausal women. Without localized estrogen, the pelvic floor physically degrades. The vaginal mucosal tissue thins out, losing elasticity. Glycogen levels drop, which starves healthy bacteria and causes the vaginal pH to spike above 5, creating an environment highly vulnerable to harmful bacteria like E. coli. Hot flashes and night sweats often fade on their own over a few years. GSM does not. Left untreated, the physical atrophy, painful intercourse, and recurrent urinary tract infections will continuously worsen. This clinical flowchart from the British Menopause Society outlines the first-line treatments for GSM. Because the degradation is localized to the pelvic floor, doctors prescribe localized solutions, primarily low-dose estradiol pessaries or estriol creams inserted directly into the vagina. Another pathway detailed here utilizes vaginal DHEA. DHEA is a pro-hormone. Through a localized biological process called intracrinology, the epithelial cells in the vagina absorb the DHEA and convert it directly into targeted estrogen and testosterone right where the tissue needs it. Because these treatments are applied locally and synthesized directly by the pelvic tissue, almost nothing absorbs into the wider bloodstream. They carry zero systemic risk, making them incredibly safe to use indefinitely, even for many breast cancer survivors with clearance from their oncology team. Modern menopause care is no longer about prescribing a single pill and hoping for the best. By isolating each hormone, understanding how it routes through the body, and matching the delivery method to the symptom, medicine can finally restore a woman's physiological baseline safely and accurately. Okay, let's just jump right in. Imagine being told the only thing that could stop your debilitating hot flashes, your sleepless nights, and that crushing brain fog might also give you cancer. For over 2 decades, that wasn't some hypothetical nightmare. It was the terrifying reality for millions of women, all thanks to one headline that changed absolutely everything. But what if that headline was wrong? The year was 2002. A huge study, the Women's Health Initiative, or WHI for short, was supposed to give us all the answers. Instead, it dropped a bombshell. News channels, newspapers, you name it, they were all running with the same terrifying story. And just like that, prescriptions were torn up, pills were thrown away. An entire generation of women and their doctors were suddenly convinced that the most effective treatment for menopause was basically a poison pill. But what if that was only part of the story? What if the data was completely misinterpreted, twisted up in a media frenzy? What if for the last 20 years we've been operating on fear instead of the actual facts? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on the real science of hormone therapy. You and I were going to dismantle the myths that have held women captive for years. We're going to look at the actual data that never made the primetime headlines. And I promise you, by the end of this explainer, you will have a clear, evidence-based roadmap to take back control of your health. So here's the plan. First, we'll go back to the epicenter of the fear, the Great Hormone Scare. Then we'll challenge everything you thought you knew about estrogen and progesterone. We'll also uncover the secret role of a forgotten hormone in women's health that could literally change everything. We're going to expose a silent epidemic affecting millions. And finally, I'll give you a step-by-step modern roadmap so you can make confident, informed choices. All right, let's get into it. Section 1. The Great Hormone Scare. To really get where we are today, we have to understand the seismic event that shaped the last 20 years of women's health. Let's just look at the timeline of how this all went down. In 2002, the WHI results hit the press and chaos ensued. By 2004, the use of hormone therapy had totally cratered. But then something really interesting started to happen. Away from the cameras, researchers kept digging into the very same data. And over the next decade, a completely different picture began to emerge. It showed the risks were much, much smaller, and that for many women, the benefits were actually huge. But these quieter, more nuanced findings, they were buried on like page 12. They never got the same primetime coverage. This all led to a landmark decision in 2026, when the Department of Health and Human Services announced it was removing the FDA's most severe warning, the black box warning, from these medications. And look, this wasn't some minor tweak. This was a fundamental reversal. It was basically an admission that the initial panic was based on an incomplete picture. As Dr. Alicia Jackson said, it was an incredible step forward. So what did the science and data actually show? What was the truth that got totally lost in the headlines? Well, that brings us right to Section 2, Rethinking Estrogen and Progesterone. Let's tackle the biggest fear head-on, the supposed link to breast cancer. Okay, so what was the actual number that sparked all this fear? What was the risk the WHI study found? Honestly, prepare to be shocked. The study found that for women on combined therapy, there was an increase of just 8 additional cases of breast cancer per 10,000 women per year. Let that sink in for a second. The annual risk increase that terrified an entire generation of women was just 0.08%. But here's the part that really should have been the headline. The arm of the study for women on estrogen-only therapy, get this, it didn't just find no increased risk, it actually suggested a slight reduction in breast cancer. It was protective. How is this not the story? Putting that tiny number in perspective is everything. Just look at this comparison. That tiny increased risk from combined HRT is comparable to the risk we take on from drinking 2 glasses of wine a night or from being obese or inactive. I mean, think about that. We accept these other risks every single day, often without a second thought. And yet for 2 decades, hormone therapy was demonized. If you've ever felt confused or just plain scared by this topic, let me know down in the comments. And hey, if this breakdown is already clearing things up for you, do me a favor and smash that like button. It really tells YouTube that this is critical information more people need to see. But the story gets even more specific because, as it turns out, not all hormones are created equal. You see, the WHI study used an older synthetic progestin. Think of it like a key that's almost right. It fits in the lock, sure, but it might also jiggle open a few other doors you didn't intend to open. Now, today's gold standard is body-identical micronized progesterone. This isn't a close enough key. It is a perfect molecular copy of the key your own body makes. And the research on it is stunning. It shows no increased risk of breast cancer for up to 5 years of use. This one distinction changes the entire conversation. We've untangled the biggest myths about the main hormones, but there is another crucial player that has been almost completely ignored in women's health for decades, and it might just be the secret key to reclaiming your energy, your mood, and your focus. That is coming up next. Welcome to Section 3, the Testosterone Revolution. Yeah, I said testosterone. For far too long, it's been typecast as the male hormone, but the science is crystal clear. It is absolutely essential for women's health, and its decline during menopause can have profound, life-altering effects. Just take a look at this list and be really honest with yourself. Do any of these sound familiar? That constant, unshakable irritability? The anxiety that just seems to pop up out of nowhere? The crippling fatigue that no amount of sleep can fix? For so many women, this is chalked up to, oh, I'm just getting older. But what if it's not? What if it's a direct result of losing a hormone that doctors have been ignoring for decades? Now look at this. A groundbreaking 2024 study followed women who were already on standard HRT, but were still struggling. When they added a small dose of testosterone, the results were incredible. Okay, 52% reported an improvement in libido. That's the one we might expect. But look at this. Nearly half reported a better mood. Almost 40% said their brain fog lifted, and they could actually focus again. This is game-changing. It proves testosterone isn't just about sex drive. It's about feeling like yourself again. So let's just reframe this, once and for all. Testosterone is not a male hormone. It is a human hormone. In women, it is absolutely crucial for the health of our brain, our bones, our muscles, and our overall sense of well-being. Ignoring it is like trying to solve a puzzle with a giant piece missing. Now, the next piece of this puzzle is a condition that is so common, yet so rarely discussed, that understanding it could be a complete game changer for your quality of life. If you want to be armed with this kind of information, make sure you're subscribed with those notifications turned on so you never miss one of these deep dives. Okay, let's move to Section 4 and talk about solving a silent epidemic. It's called Genitourinary Syndrome of Menopause, or GSM, and while you may not have heard the name, I guarantee you its symptoms affect the majority of postmenopausal women. So what is it? Well, GSM is what happens when declining levels of estrogen and, testosterone affect the tissues of the vulva, the vagina, and the urinary tract. And this leads to things like dryness, itching, and painful intimacy, but also urinary issues. Having to go all the time, that sense of urgency, symptoms that can make daily life really uncomfortable and just tank a woman's confidence and well-being. Experts call GSM a silent epidemic for a really simple reason. Women aren't talking about it, and a lot of times doctors aren't asking about it. There's this tendency to just accept these symptoms as an inevitable, maybe embarrassing part of getting older, but they are not. This is a treatable medical condition, plain and simple. And you know what the best news of all is? This is one of the most treatable conditions in all of menopause. The solutions are simple, they're safe, and they are incredibly effective. Just take a look at this official treatment guide. For most women, the answer is a local, low-dose vaginal estrogen, or DHEA, that restores health right where it's needed, with almost zero absorption into the rest of the body. The bottom line is, you absolutely do not have to live with these symptoms. Okay, we've busted the myths, we've explored the cutting-edge science. Now for our final section, your modern menopause roadmap. Let's bring all of this together into a practical guide that you can actually use. First things first, how you take your hormones matters. A lot. Think of it this way, taking an oral pill is like sending a package through a busy central sorting facility, your liver, where it gets processed and can sometimes cause backups. Using a patch or a gel that's absorbed through the skin, well, that's like direct delivery. It goes straight into the bloodstream, avoiding that main hub altogether. It's cleaner, it's more efficient, and it avoids that risk of a traffic jam or a blood clot, which is why it's now the recommended first choice for most women. Now, for a question I get all the time, isn't HRT just a weaker birth control pill? The answer is a hard no, and this is a really critical distinction. Birth control pills use higher doses of synthetic hormones to basically shut down your system and prevent pregnancy. HRT uses lower body identical doses to simply top up what your body is now missing. Now, if you're in perimenopause and you still need contraception, the pill can be a great two-for-one solution. But if you don't, HRT is the more targeted modern approach. We have covered so much ground here. To make all of this super easy to remember, we've created a completely free one-page guide that summarizes all these treatment options and key questions to ask your doctor. It's designed to empower you for your next doctor's visit. The link is right at the top of the description. Go ahead and click it and download it right now. So where do you go from here? How do you take all this information and turn it into real action? Here is your 4-step path forward, and you can start on step 1 the second this is over. 1. Track your symptoms. 2. Assess your personal risks. 3. Find a clinician who is actually up to date on this science. And 4. Engage in shared decision-making. This is your health. You are the CEO of you. Let me just leave you with one final thought. For decades, we've been taught to view menopause as an ending, a disease, something to be endured or feared. But what if that is the biggest myth of all? What if we reframe it as an inflection point, an opportunity to check in, to understand our bodies, and to proactively manage our health to make the next third of our lives our absolute best and healthiest yet? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. If this explainer helped clear up the confusion for you, please share it with a friend, a sister, a mother, anyone who needs to see this. And don't forget to subscribe for more explainers that cut through all the noise and put you in control of your health.